Ex-husband's illness turns my kids against me, demanding I cancel my anniversary trip and care for him. I'm 56 years old, and I've been married to my wonderful wife, Angela, also 56, for just a year. We're about to celebrate our very first anniversary, and I've been brimming with excitement about our upcoming overseas trip, just the two of us, exploring somewhere new and making the most of our happiness. Unfortunately, that happiness has been shadowed by my ex-husband, Dan, recently being rushed to the hospital. Looking back, my story with Dan began in college. We met young, and when I found out I was pregnant, we rushed into marriage because it felt like the right thing to do. In hindsight, it was anything but. From the start, I had to set aside my dreams and ambitions to become a full-time caregiver, while Dan became the sole provider. Resentment grew on both sides. He never missed a chance to remind me I wasn't contributing financially, especially when I asked him to participate in parenting or chores. Even worse, his mother would barge in, unannounced, and he'd never defend me when she criticized the state of our home. She considered herself royalty and looked down on me. I felt suffocated, trapped in a life I didn't recognize. If not for my children, Junior, age 34, Sarah, 32, Michelle, 29, and Mike, 29, I would have left years earlier. But Dan didn't share my sense of duty. Without warning, he served me with divorce papers. The process was brutal. Still, after that first tough year, I began to thrive. I found my identity again, landed a good job, and secured a cozy apartment for myself within just a few years. Then, out of nowhere a couple weeks ago, I learned that Dan had been hospitalized. The doctors pulled him through, but his health remains in a dire state. According to what my kids tell me, I haven't spoken directly to Dan. His current wife stretches herself thin working and caring for their kids, with her own parents picking up the slack to avoid paying for daycare. Every conversation with my children has become a chorus of their exhaustion and anxiety over caring for Dan. At first, I thought I was doing my job as a mother by listening and supporting them emotionally. But the other day, they all confronted me. They told me it was hurtful and selfish of me to do nothing to help their father, and that as their mother, I should care about his welfare, if not for him, then at least to make their lives easier. They pointed out that my job is flexible, so they want me to drop in on Dan twice a week to make sure he's clean and fed, or, if I won't do that myself, they expect me to pay for a nurse. I refused. I told them that Dan and I have been divorced for years, and that his new wife can handle it. That's when they dropped a bombshell. According to them, she doesn't care whether Dan lives or dies, and is counting on his life insurance. Then Sarah burst into tears, asking me if I even cared whether she'd have a dad anymore. Junior and Mike accused me of harboring bitterness. Michelle pleaded with me to prioritize them, suggesting I reschedule my anniversary trip with Angela. Now my ex-in-laws are calling me too, claiming it's my moral duty to step in, and warning that I'd be a horrible mother if I don't. Am I wrong to stand my ground? Update 1. Let me clear things up right away. I'm a woman, happily married to another woman. My parents passed away years ago, so their opinions aren't even a consideration in any of this. Both my wife and I have children from previous relationships, but we didn't even meet until our kids were already adults, meaning that, aside from ourselves, no one else has actually shared a household with us. Now, on to what really matters. I went on a cruise. It was absolutely fantastic. My wife and I had the best time, just the two of us enjoying ourselves on the open sea. Unsurprisingly, my children were not happy about my decision. They called over and over, insisting that I was selfish and terrible for choosing this vacation over supporting the family. I had to remind them, as many people would agree, that I was no longer obligated to their father. He divorced me. After all, if any one of my children had a medical crisis, I wouldn't hesitate for a second to cancel every plan to be by their side. For their father, though, it was different. At first, I thought my stance would be enough. But my kids kept calling and texting so incessantly during the first 3 days of the trip that I finally decided I needed a break. I blocked them temporarily to enjoy my time in peace. Unfortunately, during the cruise, my ex-husband's health took a turn for the worse, resulting in a hospital visit and, due to inadequate care, untriggered investigation. I didn't hear about any of this until I returned, unblocked my children, and was promptly met with blame from some of them. It became painfully clear they just needed someone to direct their anger toward, and I was an easy target. I could understand. The fear and hurt of possibly losing a parent you love can be overwhelming, and it needs some place to go. Still, the accusation stung. I hope we can eventually all sit down, maybe with a family therapist, and sift through this mess together. But I'd be lying if I said the guilt and self-doubt weren't creeping back in. Old habits die hard, and I've spent so long putting aside my own needs for my children's. This time, though, my wife, my therapist, and even a small, stubborn voice inside me snapped me out of it. My kids are adults, and my ex-husband simply isn't my responsibility anymore. My attempts to reach out have mostly been met with silence. Some of my children have made it very clear I'm cut off from seeing my grandchildren, at least for now, as a kind of punishment. It hurts. I'm still wrestling with this aching guilt and all the second-guessing it brings. But through it all, my wife, my stepchildren, and pieces of my extended family have come together to support me. My friends? Mostly neutral, watching, waiting. This is my reality right now, bittersweet and complicated, full of love and pain and hope that one day, we'll find our way back to each other. Update 2. On the day itself, my wife and I woke up quietly, shared a simple breakfast together, and exchanged our spouse gifts in the comforting hush of the morning. Afterward, we prepared for the bustle ahead, readying ourselves as everyone else began to arrive. The guests included Megan, Miranda, 34F, Miranda's husband Jack, 34 meters, the grandkids who are 8 and 5, and a couple of others. Noticeably, none of my own children or their families came. It stung, though I can't say it surprised me. It seemed as if everyone could sense it too, because the kids were especially affectionate with me all day. We threw ourselves into laughter over board games, shared food, made crafts with the little ones, talked about both big and small things, watched movies with popcorn, and finally sat down for gifts. Despite the gap left by my children's absence, it was undeniably a lovely day. At some point, Miranda pulled me aside, her face serious but kind. I wasn't expecting what came next. She asked me to adopt her. I won't get into all the intimate details, but Miranda's biological father had never really been part of her life and she hadn't spoken to him in about 3 years. She explained that with so much unpredictability in life, she didn't want a distant man, her biological father, to have control over her medical decisions if something were to happen, especially if Jack or my wife couldn't step in. She and Jack both know that if anything ever occurred, I would never let my wife raise the grandkids alone. The weight and love behind her request hit me so hard it brought me to tears. I accepted, overwhelmed and grateful, and soon after, we made the announcement together. We're preparing to start the legal process in about a week, but already the kids have started calling me a special grandma-styled name, and the shift has been heartwarming in ways I can't quite describe. We took photos in the midst of the celebration and posted them joyfully, but I didn't expect my own children to see them, since I'd been blocked. Somehow, though, word reached them. Suddenly, all of them unblocked me just to show their anger. Messages poured in, full of upset. They couldn't understand why anyone would do an adult adoption, called it disrespectful to announce it online, and said they were hurt I made Megan a sweater yet never made anything for them. The truth is, after my grandmother, who'd taught me to crochet, passed away when I was a teen, I just stopped crocheting. I never found the time when my kids were little, and didn't start again until recently. I tried to call and explain, but almost immediately, I was blocked again. But then my daughter-in-law, Junior's wife, reached out with more insight. My children are furious that I gave gifts to Miranda's kids and not my real grandkids. They accuse me of replacing them all with my wife's family, call me selfish, and insist they can't believe I never tried to reach out to see their children. The ache of their anger stings. I wanted to reach out, I always wanted to, but I thought that holding back, for everyone's sake, was less harmful than forcing myself into their lives unwelcome. Now, all I can do is hold on to the love I've found in this blended family, even as my heart aches with the hope that maybe one day, things will be different. Update 3. I'm 56 years old, married to my wife, also 56, and recently I've found myself in the middle of a storm I never saw coming. I have 4 children, 35-year-old son, 32-year-old daughter, and a set of 29-year-old twins, 1 boy, 1 girl, all from my previous marriage. Years ago, their father and I divorced, and it wasn't an amicable split by any means. About a decade has passed, and yet somehow, I've been dragged back into his orbit against my will. A few months back, my children all decided to cut me out of their lives because I refused to take care of their father. Yes, you heard that right, they wanted me to step back into my ex's world, essentially as a favor to them, and be his caregiver. My answer was a clear, resounding no. Why should I put my life on hold, especially when I'd moved on and built a new life with my wife? Instead, I chose to go on a cruise with her, prioritizing our happiness. Since then, not a single direct word from my children. The silence is heavy, and sometimes all I want is to see my kids and grandkids. The only way that would happen is if I showed up unannounced and forced my way into their homes, but I refuse to be that person. This isn't an easy burden to carry, and I miss them every single day. But both my wife and my therapist agree that if I give in now, I'll be setting a precedent, one where my boundaries are meaningless, and I'll be pressured to cave to all their demands. They've made it painfully clear, either I care for their father nearly every day, or I get nothing from them. I'm not willing to do that, not after everything between me and my ex. Recently, though, my eldest son's wife, Kate, reached out unexpectedly. She called and told me she was having an emergency, and she wondered if I wanted to see my grandchildren, Emma, 9, and Kyle, 6. Of course, I jumped at the chance. I didn't think twice, assuming my son was in the loop. After all, I was still blocked on his end, so I couldn't contact him even if I'd wanted to. Kate dropped the kids off, and I cherished every minute with them. A few hours later, Kate came back, this time asking if I could watch the kids again soon. It crossed my mind to ask how my son felt about this. She insisted he was still upset, but okay with it, and told me to reach out to her if there were any issues. It felt a little strange, but the chance to see my grandkids was something I'd been craving. But the truth wasn't so simple. The blow-up came fast. My son showed up at my house, absolutely furious. That's when I learned that he and Kate had been having issues since November. She had already started looking for lawyers after my son told her she needed to quit her part-time job, stop her online schooling, and be a full-time stay-at-home mom, all while working on baby number 3, no less. According to Kate, my son had been sabotaging her efforts, even going so far as to cut off the daycare payments. I hate to say it, but too many of the things she revealed match patterns I remember all too well, from both my son and his father. Kate has almost no local support, her nearest family is an hour away, and any friends who'd watch the kids are also friends of my son and refused to get involved. I was angry that Kate had lied to me at first, but I couldn't stay mad for long, not after getting to spend time with Emma and Kyle. It's selfish, I know. In the end, I told Kate I'd help her watch the kids, as long as she promised total honesty from here on out and understood that if my son came to pick them up, I wouldn't stop him. I went a step further and offered to pay for the kids' summer daycare program. They deserve to have fun, regardless of all the adult drama swirling around them. As predicted, my son is livid with me now. My kids unblocked me just long enough to call me a traitor and some truly horrible things. The words sting deeply, but my wife believes, and I agree, that providing a safe and loving space for our grandkids comes first. When I found out about Kate's initial lie, I made sure not to just take her word for everything, especially after the years of tangled family history. I talked to my son directly this time. Sometimes he admitted things, and other times he just didn't deny the accusations. Kate also showed me proof, screenshots, actual messages, everything that backed up her side of the story. And heartbreakingly, my son is displaying many of the behaviors I thought belonged to his father alone. For the record, my ex does have a wife now, but the last my kids mentioned, she's apparently not doing a great job, at least in their eyes. I've never contacted her, I've no desire to intrude. So, there it is. I'm just trying to do right by my grandkids, even though my own children say I'm betraying them. It hurts more than I can say, but I feel I have to put the kids first. Am I really the villain here? Update 4. Over the summer, I made the decision to pay for my son's children to attend a wonderful day camp. My intention was to give Kate, my daughter-in-law, some breathing room to get her affairs in order, and of course, I offered to look after the kids when needed. But my son, ever determined to control the situation, showed up at the camp and told the staff he didn't give his consent for the children to be there. As a result, their spots were revoked. My grandchildren were absolutely heartbroken. They had been looking forward to that camp and its many fun activities, but my son's only concern seemed to be keeping Kate tied down at home by using the children as leverage. He didn't stop there. He went as far as to threaten to call the police if the kids ever came to my place, essentially severing the time I could spend with them. Kate, understandably fed up, left the kids with him and told him to handle it on his own, making absolutely sure the kids knew who was responsible for them missing camp. When the matter went before the lawyers, my son tried to accuse Kate of abandonment, but she supplied proof that it was my son who had sabotaged the children's summer plans, and that he'd failed to offer any alternative. During the ongoing divorce, Kate managed to get my son to put in writing that he'd allow the kids to attend summer activities in the future. Thanks to a few connections through my current wife, my grandchildren managed to enroll in another summer program for the last month, and they finally got to enjoy themselves again. Kate, now in her own place and with a better paying job, has allowed me to FaceTime and see my grandchildren from time to time, which has brought me so much relief and joy. Meanwhile, my children, who had previously blocked me out of their lives, unblocked me but only to repeatedly harass and berate me over the phone. Their relentless calls eventually started to spill over, causing trouble for both my wife and myself at our respective workplaces. It got so bad we had to send them a formal legal notice to get them to leave us alone. This entire ordeal has left me exhausted and emotionally drained, but my wife and stepchildren have been my pillars, helping me through the toughest days. Life isn't perfect, and there are scars that may never fully heal, but I'm genuinely happier now than I ever was with my ex-husband. Through Kate, I found out that the worst of my ex-husband's health issues are behind him, but he's left in a permanent, less than ideal condition. As it turns out, he'd secretly blown thousands of dollars on accounts, which deeply upset his current wife, and sparked even more chaos in their lives. The most shocking, perhaps, was learning that it was actually one of my own daughters who contacted adult social services to report his situation. After a thorough investigation, no fault was found with my ex's wife. It came down to the fact that my ex simply refused to put in the effort to improve his own situation. Despite all the turmoil, I'm standing firm by what's right, protecting the well-being of my grandchildren and supporting those who truly need it. And, though the road's been rough, there's finally a sense of peace settling in my life. Update 5. At 4:13 a.m. 2 weeks ago, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I stared at it long enough to know it wasn't an accident. The nurse on the other end asked me to verify a date of birth, and when I did, she called me Mrs. Dan's last name, and told me they needed a decision maker if things went south. I sat on the edge of the bed, the blue glow of the clock cutting the dark in half, and said, calmly, that I am not his wife and have not been for a decade. She apologized, but explained he had me listed as his emergency contact and default healthcare proxy on an old form. Old forms have a way of dragging you backward. I gave her his current wife's name and number and told her to call her first and documented the call with the patient ID, the nurse's name, the time, because that's who I am now, when it comes to him, a paper trail and a boundary. Afterward, Angela rubbed my back until the sun edged the blinds. I waited for the earthquake that didn't come. The next morning, I got confirmation from the hospital's social worker that everything had been corrected and handed over to his wife, who was already there and making decisions. There was an odd relief to hearing it, like a door finally locked. No one asked me to come in. No one asked me to bring a toothbrush or hand lotion for the bedside. I wasn't needed. I made coffee, fed the cat, and went to work. Miranda's adoption finalized last Wednesday. We dressed up, nothing dramatic, she in a navy dress, me in a soft green sweater and the pearl studs my grandmother left me. The judge was kind in that businesslike way that still makes room for a smile, asked us both if this is what we wanted, and when we said yes, he signed his name and for a second I swayed because of the weight of it, what it means to be chosen at this age. The kids were there with their construction paper signs, and one of them slipped her hand into mine as the clerk took our photo. On the way out, we passed a couple arguing in whispers outside a family courtroom, and I almost laughed at the symmetry of it, papers that cut, papers that bind. By the time we'd gotten lunch and were heading home, my phone started to buzz in that familiar pattern of chaos. Word had gotten out, how, I still don't know, and my eldest left me a voicemail with the kind of fury that burns itself hollow. I didn't listen to all of it. Later that night, a bouquet with black-dyed roses and a note covered in glue on glitter arrived at our door, addressed to Mother of the Year. I stood on the mat, glitter on my palms, and felt that old nausea. We called the police and made a report. Nothing dramatic, just lines in the sand that become lines in a file. A few days later, a subpoena landed in our mailbox, my name spelled correctly for once. I was called as a witness in my son's custody hearing. My stomach did that elevator drop and then stabilized. I put on a plain blouse, tied my hair back, and reminded myself I wasn't going to perform. I was going to answer questions. The courtroom was cold. I told the truth about the camp, about the phone calls, about who paid for what and when. I showed the receipts, the email from the camp director canceling the kids' spots due to withdrawn consent, the payment record with my name on it. My son wouldn't look at me, and maybe that was a mercy. When his attorney asked if I had a vendetta against him, my throat closed and I had to take a sip of water. The judge asked her to move on. At the end, the judge issued temporary orders that put decision-making for school and extracurriculars with Kate until final hearing and ordered both of them to a co-parenting course. He said he wanted the adults to be adults. It was simple, and it still shook me. Afterward, I found a folded note under my windshield wiper. It was from Kate, thank you in a tight script, and 2 drawings, one of me and Emma at the park, our heads too big for our bodies, and one of Kyle holding a soccer ball, bigger than his torso. On the back, there were 2 words in blocky letters that are still making my heart feel like a bruise, see you. 3 days after court, 2 CPS workers knocked on our door. Anonymous report. Concern about alcohol abuse and unsafe sleeping arrangements for frequent overnight visits with minors. I blinked at them, pulled in a long breath, and invited them in. I showed them the calendar on our fridge where I marked the FaceTime calls, the entirely virtual visits. I showed them the spare room with a neatly made bed that remains, almost comically, untouched, pillows still in their department store stripes. They were friendly, polite, apologetic even, and gone within 20 minutes. When the door closed, I sat on the bottom step of the stairs and laughed a little and then cried harder than I wanted to. Angela handed me a tissue and then another. The hospital called again, this time, the social worker. Not an emergency. She wanted to make sure I knew the contact had been changed and that they found the old file circumstances odd. He'd updated his address twice over the years, but never the proxy. We made small talk I didn't expect to have with someone in a hospital, about paperwork and digital systems and how the past clings in fields people forget to scroll to. She also mentioned something I hadn't asked about and didn't need to know, but there it was, floating between us. There's no active life insurance policy. It had lapsed years ago. It shouldn't matter and somehow it did. A story unwound, and the room got quiet. Miranda hosted a little dinner to celebrate, just family and one of her close friends who took Polaroids and taped them to a string with clothespins. The kids insisted I wear an accordion folded paper crown. We ate lemon chicken and a strawberry tart that was too pretty to cut and then we cut it anyway. I crocheted 2 small sweaters for the grandkids there, a deep teal for one, mustard for the other, and when I handed them over there were those round eyes and soft hands and a chorus of "It's so soft." In small voices. Angela squeezed my knee under the table. My phone stayed face down, quiet, for hours. Later that week, a process server tried to hand me a stack of papers on our front walk. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a flailing, a request from one of my daughters for mediation with conditions attached that read like a hostage note. Show up at their father's house twice a week for 90 days, pay for night care, apologize in writing for abandonment, then, maybe, we can talk. I signed nothing. I told the server, the poor man just doing his job, that I'd forward it to my attorney, and I did. We sent a reply back that was measured and boring and final. No, what's new, what's real, what I'm holding on to is this. When I log into the camp's portal now, my name is on the pickup list for the fall after school program, at Kate's request and with my consent. I have Tuesdays at the library with Emma, who has decided chapter books are the way to go and who carefully dog-ears pages like the world's tiniest librarian. I have Saturday mornings scheduled with Kyle's soccer team, where he's more interested in rescuing every ladybug from the grass than kicking a ball. I have a photo on my mantle of me and Miranda, both of us signing our names, her with neat, precise loops, me with my messy, sprawling script, and I don't care how it looks. I cannot stop my children from telling a story about me that fits the shape of their hurt. I can only refuse to step back into a role that was killing me. I can only keep my door locked and my table set, both at the same time. When the phone rings in the night now, I'll answer if it's mine to answer. When it's not, I will let it go. And in the morning, I'll make the coffee, count the glitter still hiding in the doormat, and keep moving forward. Update 6. At 5:07 a.m. last Tuesday, the phone rang again. Not the hospital this time, his wife. Her voice was low and flat, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping house. She told me Dan died at 4:58. She said it twice, as if it might land softer the second time. I thanked her for calling. I told her I was sorry. We said the small, sturdy things that get said between people who share a history and nothing else. When I hung up, the cat pressed his face into my knee until I reached down and scratched behind his ear. I made coffee and watched the light come up. I stood at the sink and thought about nothing and everything in a way I cannot explain. By noon, a process server knocked, 2 certified envelopes and an apologetic smile. One was a notice from the funeral home, the other was a probate packet with my name in the wrong place, executor, per a will dated 2006. The divorce should have changed that. In our state, it changes a lot of things, but not always the job titles on old pieces of paper. My attorney emailed a 1-page renunciation. I printed, signed, scanned it back, then drove to the courthouse anyway because I needed something physical to put between us. The clerk took my form and stamped it so hard the paper jumped. I walked out holding proof that I didn't belong to that part of his story anymore. In the elevator, the doors opened on the second floor and there they were, my son, my daughters, my ex-mother-in-law in a coat with fur at the collar even though the air outside was warm. My son looked through me and then away. One of the girls said my name like a question and then like an accusation and then didn't say it again. My ex-mother-in-law called me by Dan's last name and I said, quietly, that it isn't mine. No one moved closer. The elevator chimed and I let the doors close. I didn't attend the funeral. I wrote a check to the funeral home for a small amount with a memo line that simply said flowers and then tore it up and wrote a second one to the public library in his name. It felt more honest. Kate sent me a photo of Emma in a black cardigan, her hair smoothed back too neatly, holding the program. Kyle's sock had a hole at the ankle and I would have preferred to think about that, to count stitches in my head and calculate yarn. 2 days after, his wife called again. She had found a plastic tote in the garage with my name on masking tape and a hand I recognized as his mother's. She asked if I wanted it. I told her yes and made sure we picked a time when no one else would be there. Angela drove me. The garage door opened with a metal cough. The tote was heavier than I expected. Inside, a stack of albums I thought had vanished, the kids with frosting on their noses, a Christmas tree that was too big for the room so we cut off the top and pretended we meant to, my face young and a little stunned. My grandmother's crochet hooks in a zippered pencil case with a Garfield that has faded to a pale orange sigh. A receipt from a thrift store dated 1999 tucked into the back of a frame. 3 of the kids' drawings that I remember taping to the fridge and then forgetting to take with me when I left. They had been peeled off carefully and saved and I don't know by whom. At the bottom, my wedding dress in a plastic dry cleaner's bag that had turned crisp with time. I stood with my fingers on the hanger for a long minute and then I put it back and closed the lid. The past was too loud under that plastic. There was also a key taped inside the tote under a fold of newspaper, a storage unit number scrawled next to it. I wrote it down and told myself I wasn't going. Then I went. The manager had to look up the record 3 times because it was under an address I barely remembered. When the door rolled up, I breathed in dust and the smell of old cardboard. More albums. A box of kitchen things that weren't mine. A box that was, a hand mixer with 1 beater missing, a recipe card in my handwriting that says do not trust oven timer. On the top shelf, a shoebox with letters. Not to me. Some to a username written on sheet after sheet like manifests. It felt voyeuristic and small to look, so I didn't. I left everything that wasn't mine and carried out the pieces that were. On the way home I thought about how much of a life you can fit into corrugated square feet and how often we make our own museums without a curator. The final custody hearing happened in between the storage unit and the funeral. It's strange how the big things don't wait for one another. The courtroom was warmer this time. The judge spoke plainly. He granted joint custody with primary decision-making to Kate for school and medical decisions and prohibited either parent from withdrawing the children from licensed care or activities after enrollment without written agreement. He put a non-disparagement clause in the order. No talking about the other parent in front of the kids, no talking about me either. He looked at my son and then at Kate and said he wanted both of them to be ordinary for the children, and that ordinary was not a punishment. On the walk back to the car, I caught myself smiling at the weirdness of that word, ordinary, like a gift. The day after the funeral, someone slid a glossy funeral program into our mail slot with no envelope. I set it on the table. Angela picked it up and turned it over. When she set it back down, 1 grain of glitter from the black rose bouquet weeks ago caught at the edge and clung like a hangnail. I vacuumed the entry rug again and again. It stayed. You would be surprised what survives. At the library on Tuesday, Emma chose a book with a girl and a fox on the cover and whispered to me that she felt nervous, like if she turned the page it might not be there. We turned the page together. It was there. We got the stamp. Kyle brought me a ladybug outside and asked if I knew that they sometimes pretend to be dead so birds won't eat them. I told him I did know and that sometimes grown-ups do something like that when things are too big. He said, like naps, and I said, exactly. In the evenings, I've been washing the old albums with soft cloths, page protectors that have yellowed, corners that needed a little glue. I send one photo a week to a shared email address that my attorney set up for contact about the grandkids. No commentary, no bait, just a picture and a date. My son wrote back once. He said stop. I did not send another that week. The week after, I sent a different photo to Kate, Jr. at 5 in a paper crown, chocolate on his face, looking exactly like his son. She sent back a word I hadn't heard from that side in a long time. Thank you. A patrol car idled outside our house one night and my stomach did the drop again, the one it does now when lights flash where they shouldn't. It wasn't for us. The officer was helping an older neighbor who locked herself out, and I watched from the upstairs window as he slid her a spare key through the mail slot and she clapped her hands like a child. Angela laughed when I told her. I cried later, in the shower where the water could get all the credit. This morning, I took the plastic bag with the dress out to the thrift store and put it in the donation bin. I didn't leave a note. I didn't take a photo. I drove home and sat on the edge of the bed and felt the absence like a clean shelf. Then I made a pot of coffee and counted the last of the glitter out of the doormat with the tip of a butter knife, and when I couldn't find any more, I stopped looking. Angela came up behind me and slid her arms around my waist, chin on my shoulder, and said, "We're okay." I said, "I know." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't argue.